Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Busy taken. Man, with that wind up, Ryan, nobody would know that do you currently have COVID, or is it in the rear view mirror?
Well, since RFK Jr. made it illegal to test for COVID, I can't speak to that.
Yeah, but you're not here. You're not in the U.S.
I'm in Bogota,
where keep up on the news.
Yeah, nobody's tested for COVID in Colombia in a couple of years. So, no, but I think the reason I think I had COVID is because I came back from my, a lot of flights to get nowhere trip.
Hey, you got a suit out of it.
Yeah. I came back sick, and then I was sick for a couple of days, sore throat, little cough, and then I felt fine, and then a couple of days later, I felt the sore throat come back again for 2 days, and that is what they call like COVID rebound. That's
sure.
That's why I think it was COVID.
Thanks for it's 2022, and I've never heard that before. Thank you.
Well, I know our listeners might call it Paxlovid rebound. They are more conservative listeners. So, but yeah, so that's where
Big
that's
Ten podcast. We're Romney Democrats here. You are welcome. Now, Ryan, as much as I would love to dig deep into your COVID, we've got a lot of
much. We got Teddy Roosevelt, who never had COVID or yellow fever.
It's sort of shocking that we've not done this episode yet, that it took to episode 211, because it's a passion point for me. And this is places to travel, to experience, to commune with the spirit of my favorite president and yours, Theodore Roosevelt.
Your favorite president, one of mine.
Yeah, you're I feel like this is kind of teeing up. We're going to eventually have to do the version for Lincoln where you're going to be more the lead.
Or FDR. If the problem is we share our favorite presidents, and it's not like I'm a bigger Nixon guy than you, probably.
Yeah. No, hey, if you think I don't follow the Nixon presidential library on Instagram, you are wrong, my friend. Amazing. You are wrong. Yeah. But what's nice about both TR and Lincoln is we've experienced some of these places together on various trips we've taken. We did the Abraham Lincoln birthplace on our trip to Kentucky, so we'll be able to start it off there. And similarly, we used to work one block away from the TR birthplace, but I don't want to lift the curtain this early. We got too much.
We got to take off. Real quick though, we got a lot of response to the last episode where I talked about my adventures not going to Ireland.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So thank you for all the DMs and the comments. We appreciate them, and I'm safe
mostly
and sound.
Supportive of you. Some, I think, they know who you are. They're a little skeptical. Some gate agent sympathizers.
Yeah, well, my mother's the most skeptical of the story. So
you know what? That makes me skeptical because I believe in Judy.
My mom just thinks that I'm still the 25-year-old Ryan that I once was.
Well, you still act like that. Your body just can't handle it as well. So she has a good point.
But I am here in Bogota, where I'll be for the next couple of weeks before I head up down to Maryland. So I think maybe the next episode,
I think it's up. I think that's technically up from Bogota.
It depends which way you go. I'm not the captain. He might want to fly the other way.
I think it's 50-50. You even get allowed on the plane at this point.
And then we wanted to give another shout out to our listener and friend of the pod at this point, Andres Galvin, who has
do you know Andres? I'm picking up that you know Andres.
I've never met Andres in real life. He's just been a fan. He's a fan and a follower since the early days. Like I remember he had posted a comment months. We've talked about Andres at the top of the show before.
Well, Andres took the time to write one of the most beautiful emails we've ever received at outofofficepod@gmail.com. And we thank you for it.
Well, to be fair, most of the emails we receive are pitches for CEOs of kind of sketchy travel companies.
Which, by the way, I've booked a CEO. I got an interview next week. I'm excited. We got the Royal Caribbean CEO coming.
Well, that's a big CEO. Yeah.
Well, for sure. Oh yeah. I mean, usually it's like people from Getaway or whatever. I remember I had that guy on.
Nice guy.
Anyway, they sold. He was quite successful. Anyway, Andres came back on and he said, "I've been a massive fan since the summer of 2023, going back and listening to every single episode. I just wanted to reach out and tell you how fantastic and integral you've become in my life. I look forward every other Tuesday morning like you would not believe. The way you both view not just travel, but culture, cuisine, and politics really speak to my soul." You know, getting something like that is like a shot of adrenaline right in the arm, isn't it, Ryan? It makes me want to just record all day.
It does, and it certainly reaffirms your belief in our posting schedule. So thank you for that.
I mean, my belief is we should go back to weekly. Ryan is on this. He's thinking maybe 5 to 10 minute episode every other month.
That is not true.
Every
folks.
other year.
Not true. But you know who overstayed his welcome? Teddy Roosevelt, by at least one election.
No. Okay, that's not fair. But you're right. We're going to have to get into Teddy. I'm going to give a very brief history, but mostly we'll be telling the history through the different sites that you can visit. So I think it's time to take off. This is going to be a busy plane ride.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. Well, for those who don't know, I mean, Theodore Roosevelt is he's one of the biggest presidents we've ever had. He's one of the most historically significant presidents. I would say he's a controversial president. And in some ways, I've been reevaluating his legacy in terms of what's going on today, because he was one of the first imperial presidents, I would say. And sometime in histories of the imperial presidency, Theodore Roosevelt looms large.
Yeah, he was certainly a proponent of the Monroe Doctrine. You know,
he was extreme. I mean, he pushed the limits, and he came up with really creative ways to kind of gain power. And I think in his personal life, he was just an incredibly interesting character. I mean, he was very odd. He was strange looking. He had strange interests. He was incredibly energetic. He was known for just tirelessly going on and on and on and on, pushing the limits, getting up early, running, swimming, wrestling with his staff. He wrote an enormous number of books. He read an enormous amount of books. He had
incredible, famous reader.
Yeah, I mean, he would read one or two books in a day. And he grew up wealthy in New York City, but then he was enamored with the idea of the American West, and he owned a cattle ranch, 2 cattle ranches actually, out in North Dakota. And he also had a lot of tragedy in his life. He had a young wife, Alice, who died, and then he kind of retreated to the West to get over that. And then, he had this kind of uncertain future. He was obviously super well connected. He went to Harvard. He knew he wanted to be in government, but had kind of these not terribly notable posts. He was a police commissioner in New York City. He was in the federal bureaucracy, and then kind of out of the blue became vice president. And then President McKinley was assassinated, and that's what put Theodore Roosevelt in the president's chair, and he became a hugely popular figure since then.
And famously, couldn't they not find him after?
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about where he was and where he got inaugurated. It's a great story, and he famously vowed to only serve one term. So he had 3 years from vice president. Like, McKinley got shot early in the term. Then he got reelected. And then he deeply, deeply regretted handing off the presidency. He chose Taft as his successor. Taft ran. Then TR was super disappointed with him, and he tried to take the presidency back, running as a third-party candidate of the Bull Moose Party, and was crushed not to win that election, especially because he was so popular.
And you don't want to be crushed by Taft, because that's
well, he wasn't crushed by Taft, but he didn't win the.
Sorry, that was a mean joke about Taft. I apologize.
And then he sort of goes through this soul searching, and he goes all around the world. He famously takes this insane trip on the Amazon. There's a great book called The River of Doubt that covers that, where he nearly dies trying to map this river in South America, and then comes back and he kind of settles into a famous person's life of trying to advise, trying to stay in the game, but also enjoying his semi-retirement. But he was a man who liked activity, so that was very hard for him. So the first place that it makes sense to explore TR is, of course, his birthplace. And Ryan, when you and I were at the agency, Blue State Digital, together where we first met, we were half a block away from the TR birthplace.
We were, and we were doing a project with the American Museum of Natural History. So I remember going over there as a group with some of our Blue State colleagues and taking
That's right. We did the big tour midday. Yeah. It was a really nice excuse to get over there because we're going to talk about the American Museum of Natural History too. So TR was born in New York City. There's a townhouse at 28 East 20th Street, and that's where he was born.
Is that where he was born physically, or did they?
Yeah, he was physically born there. And and he grew up. That was like where he was a child. The birthplace that's preserved is a recreation of it.
Right.
And so not everything's authentic, but they've done their best to be as authentic as possible. And they have a nice museum gallery too. So they tell a lot of a good, they really encapsulate TR's childhood.
But it's facing the wrong street, right? Because the famously Lincoln's casket goes by, and young Teddy looks out and sees it. And
that's right.
He wouldn't have been able to do that if it was on the street.
It's further into the block than it would have been. And what Ryan is mentioning is when Lincoln's body went on tour around the United States, it came up New York, and you can actually see TR in a picture looking out the original house's window. Pretty amazing photo. Incredible. And there's only a handful of photos like that of future presidents like with
JFK and young
JFK and Clinton, of course.
Classic.
And then I think there's like a John Adams and Biden picture out there when Biden was like 20 or 30.
I think Biden's pushing 40 at that point, but yeah.
We got some listeners who are going to love that we made a Biden his old joke. All right.
Very timely.
And so it's a fun historic house to go. I would say it doesn't, it's not like a top rank historic house. If you're a real Ted head like I am, you enjoy it. It's got a nice gift shop. The museum gallery, probably my favorite thing that they have is they have the glasses case that saved TR's life when he was out campaigning in 1912. He was shot while making a speech by a saloon keeper named John Schrank. And John Schrank had these dreams that the slain President McKinley was speaking to him and said, TR murdered me. And Schrank decided to take matters into his own hands and shot TR. TR had a very thick speech. He had very bad vision and thick glasses, and he had a thick speech printed out and had it folded in his pocket with a glasses case behind. The bullet went through the speech, through the glasses case, which was made of steel, and it did go into his chest, but it was so slowed by the speech in the eyeglasses case that he finished the speech and survived. It's an incredible story. It really speaks to TR's sort of machismo, that he was very obsessed with the kind of manliness and being seen as vital and energetic. And they have that glasses case preserved at the birthplace, which makes it well worth a visit, even just for that.
One of my favorite glasses cases that I've
historic glasses cases. Future episode.
Future episode. We're gonna do better than Broadway tickets.
For what it's worth, the Library of Congress actually has a very interesting write-up of the company that made the glasses case.
Fascinating.
That's beyond this. Now, TR, a big story of his youth is that he was a very sickly child, and he suffered from really debilitating asthma, and he kind of built himself up with physical activity. And one piece of his legacy is his great care for nature and conservation. He really supercharged the national park movement, and we're going to talk about the parks that he set aside. But he also greatly cared about animals, which seems kind of odd because he's also famous as a hunter. But in this period of the early 20th century, those two things really went hand in hand. People who hunted were often the most outspoken conservationists. I think it's very strange to modern sensibilities. And you'll see this a little bit when we get to his other historic house where it's covered in animal heads. He really believed in the preservation of nature, and while he was a great hunter, he also really felt deeply about animals and their preservation and using them to teach others about the value of nature. And so his father was one of the founders of the American Museum of Natural History, the Great Natural History Museum in New York, right on Central Park West. As Ryan mentioned, he and I did a campaign where if you know what Flat Stanley is, we basically made these little TRs. I'll post a few pictures from around the world with me holding TR. I tend to take them on a lot of trips with me. And the whole idea was to get people out of the museum, out into Central Park, exploring nature with TR as he would have wanted it to be. And what's interesting about the museum is that it is the official New York State memorial to Theodore Roosevelt. And if you actually look at the signage and all the different parts of the museum, you come to realize, oh, the entrance hall is the Theodore Roosevelt entrance hall. And there's a rotunda named after him. And the park that surrounds the Natural Museum of History is called Roosevelt Park. And my particular favorite piece that you could walk by and not realize it, when you're going into the entrance and like to pay your ticket, look at the murals that are on these enormously high walls, and they are dedicated. It's a 15-panel mural series about Theodore Roosevelt's great international conquests and activities. And so you can really read the history of him, especially as an adult, and he's in many of the paintings. And there's great quotes from TR. He was great at sort of like being quotable and pulling out brilliant sentences that were inspirational about nature and power and the presidency. And that's the entire display that greets you to the American Museum of Natural History, very fittingly.
Yes, and you used to be greeted with the big sculpture of Teddy that was deeply problematic, but now there's a new sculpture, newish, I guess, that you and I helped the marketing of. That's there of Teddy sitting down, hanging out.
Yeah, so outside on the front steps, there used to be Theodore Roosevelt looking much svelter than he typically looked in his life, atop a great steed, and on one side was an African American, and on one side was a Native American.
I mean, when you describe it like that, it sounds really bad.
It is bad. It's a pretty bad statue. I think, in fact, I mean, we were recording at the time these decisions were being made, and we both said we did think that this statue wasn't for modern times.
Yeah.
And what's especially odd about it is it's not. So yes, it was taken down, and I was curious as to what was going to happen to it. Well, it's going to a Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library that is currently under construction and set to open in 2026.
They finally got the donors together. It only took.
It's a mix of private donors and state funds, and it's going to be in Medora, North Dakota. And they are the Museum of American Museum of Natural History is doing a long-term loan to the Presidential Library of that statue, so it's not going away.
But that's where it belongs, in a museum with context, not outside with no context.
Yes, correct. And the new statue, which is inside, if you go into the museum, go down the stairs, there's the Theodore Roosevelt Rotunda, which has a lot of history about him. And there's a great statue on a bench that you can take a picture right next to. I guess we're going to have to post the picture of you and me with TR and that statue, because as Ryan said, we launched it. This was long before they removed the statue outside, but it seemed like the writing was on the wall.
Yeah, so we'll post that picture. I also have a picture of me and a Teddy Roosevelt impersonator from that day, which I will post.
Ryan, I got to say, when I discovered this Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library is set for 2026, I think that you and I should try to go together to this next year.
Let's do it.
I think we should try to go. This is the one big site on this tour that I haven't been to and you haven't been to is the Theodore Roosevelt National Park, which is in North Dakota. This presidential library is right next to the national park. And so, we could do a combined trip where we visit it. It's just that North Dakota is kind of a slog to get to.
Yeah, well, I can get out there. So let's do it.
Great. Well, one place that we have visited together is Sagamore Hill. Sagamore Hill, Sagamore, is in Oyster Bay, Long Island, New York. It's just a quick ride out of New York City. I think maybe it was like a 40-minute train ride for us, and then you got to hop an Uber or a taxi. And this was known during his presidency as TR's summer White House. Presidents back then, they used to take these long trips. I mean, they would essentially take the summer off, and only the most pressing matters would be brought to the president at that time. And so Theodore Roosevelt would decamp from D.C. and he set up at his house in Sagamore Hill. This was his home from 1885, so well before the presidency, all the way to his death in 1919. So a lot of TR in this house, and I would say that this home is one of the best historic houses to fit my test, which is if Absolutely. I dropped you in it and you were blindfolded and I ripped the blindfold off and I said, whose house is this? You would guess Theodore Roosevelt in a minute.
Yeah.
Because it looks like Gaston's hunting lodge from Beauty and the Beast. A lot of his hunting trophies all over the walls, his famous Rough Rider hat hanging up on the wall. There's a waste paper basket made out of, I believe it's an elephant's leg. It's almost to the point of absurdity. It's almost a caricature of what people think of as TR.
Yeah, I've probably been to 100 historic homes, and I can visualize walking around this living room like we did it yesterday, even though it was probably like 10 years ago.
It was really fun. We had a great time there. I think there's a picture of it on our website, maybe.
Yes, we'll
post, of us out there.
We have a lot of photos.
Yeah, we got a lot of photos to do on this one. It's fun. We had a great time out there. They too have great museum galleries in addition to the house. The house was restored just in the past few years. They ripped all the walls down. They restored all the electric, and it's very well preserved for the future. And it really is well worth the trip. And another thing that I think is under sung about this site is, even though you're so close to New York City, it is incredibly rural. You might remember, Ryan, we could walk down to a little beach where you could, TR and his family would go boating and have picnics and things. And you actually lose cell phone service out in this area. And I discovered that particularly when I went to the nearby Gravesite, which we did not do this together, Ryan. I did this on a separate trip because the Gravesite is not at the house. It's about a mile and a half away. And so when TR died January 6th, 1919, he was laid to rest in a room at Sagamore Hill, which you'll be in that room when you visit, and then transported a mile down the road to a cemetery called Young's Cemetery. And my story at Young's Cemetery was, it's on its website. It's open until dusk. Dusk is the line that it's open till. And I got there right at dusk one night. I was driving out further out into Long Island, and I was like, I have time to stop at TR's grave. And I got there and it was locked already. And I was absolutely crushed. And I realized that if you kind of lifted the gate a little bit and turned to the side, you could just scamper up the hill just to the gravesite and out. And I did that. And what was magical about it was, it's a super bucolic area, just where you would think TR would want to spend eternity. And I, as such a devoted follower of TR, really felt like I got a moment of kind of quiet and peace to say a little prayer and honor this president.
That is a lovely story. I'm glad you got to get up close.
Now, again, one place we haven't been, but which I'm going to pitch to you, Ryan, as our destination together next year, is Theodore Roosevelt National Park. So Theodore Roosevelt National Park is a huge national park in North Dakota that preserves an area that's known as the Badlands. Don't confuse it with Badlands National Park, which is in South Dakota. Even though the terrain is somewhat similar, I mean, this is really traditional prairie, middle of the country, beautiful rock formations, very desolate, kind of the land where the buffalo roam. And TR was always enamored with the idea of the West. And he went out west to the Dakota Territory at that time as a skinny, young, the really nerdy, squinty looking guy from New York and Boston. And was, immediately kind of the talk of the area, because who is this like Eastern cowboy who's showing up and who actually is like very bookish, but also, put in more energy than any of the rest of them. And he quickly became very popular with the local ranchers. He bought a ranch out there. He bought two ranches, actually. And the first ranch had a cabin that is well preserved in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And it's super accessible. It's right near the visitor center. And so he would kind of ping pong back between the Dakota Territory and New York in 1884, 85. But then his wife and his mother died in the Birthplace site on the exact same day. And Theodore Roosevelt went into a deep depression. He marked the day in his diary with just an X, a very depressed looking X, kind of like my life is over. I've lost these two most important people in the world. And he retreated to the West, and that's really where he grew into himself. And he would go on to get married and have more children. And he obviously accomplished a great deal after this huge setback. But it was ranching and solitude and reading and writing in the West that really restored him and made him the Theodore Roosevelt we know as president. And so this cabin, I think, is super fascinating to see. It's called the Maltese Cross Cabin. That was the name of the first ranch. And in fact, during his presidency, the cabin traveled all over the places. It was at the World's Fair in St. Louis. Then it went from Missouri to Portland, Oregon for the Lewis and Clark Centennial Exposition. Then it eventually went back to Fargo, North Dakota, was put up near the state capitol in Bismarck, North Dakota, and then found its final restoration and resting place in Theodore Roosevelt National Park.
Oh my gosh, that's traveled more than Teddy has.
No, that is not true. Teddy was an insane traveler. That's what makes this. To be honest, we've cut down on the number of places we could talk about here, because he was a world traveler and just fearless. And so, someday we could maybe add some more international. I know we're going to touch on the Panama Canal, but other places that you could visit that he has a legacy. Now, another sort of off the beaten path one is in Buffalo, New York. Now, this was one that I visited when Catherine and I were at a wedding in Rochester. And I said, okay, we can go to this wedding, but I need to add 2 hours onto the trip so that we can pop out to Theodore Roosevelt inaugural National Historic Site. It's in a house called the Ansley Wilcox House, and it was the local judge's personal home when William McKinley was killed. And so Theodore Roosevelt, VP, as I said, the jobs were a little different then. He had taken off to go hiking in the Adirondack Mountains. And he was in the Adirondacks, particularly on a mountain that you can still visit. I've been up near this site called Mount Marcy. And Mount Marcy is a super intense mountain to hike. He was out hiking it, out of contact, even though he knew McKinley was having after effects of being shot, and that it was possible he was going to die. And indeed, McKinley dies. They send out folks to go find Theodore Roosevelt and say, hey, you got to get back to civilization here. You're the president. And so they brought him to the local judge's house in Buffalo, and this is where he was inaugurated. And I have to say, of all the places on this list, the inaugural site in Buffalo has one of the best, most professional presentations of all Theodore Roosevelt history. Huge history of his presidency, his personality. I mean, they really make a lot with a little. He was only here to get sworn in, but it's an important moment in history, and they make the most of it. It's a super fun place.
I actually didn't know that there was. I've been to Buffalo and I did not go there. So
oh my God,
reason to go back.
Reason to go back. Now, Ryan, you have visited the Panama Canal, which I have not, which, of course, was a huge TR project.
Yeah, the Panama Canal, obviously is in Panama. And famously in 1906, Teddy Roosevelt took a trip to Panama and to tour the canal construction zone. There's famous footage of him, on the train, on the boat, like in one of the massive machines that sort of cut the rock. So if you go to Panama, you have to go to the Panama Canal because it's extraordinary. But you can also see a lot of this, a lot of Teddy Roosevelt lore and Teddy Roosevelt photos at the Panama Canal Museum, which is located in Panama City. Unfortunately, the hotel that he stayed at was torn down in the late 1900s, but he was famously one of the first guests. But there are a lot of beautiful photos of that. So I would recommend, going to the canal, because the canal itself is arguably the biggest physical presence of Teddy Roosevelt's presidency that still exists in the world. And then going to the Panama Canal Museum and checking out all the photos and stuff from his visit, where he made famous the hat, the Panama hat, all around the world.
And you've bought one of these hats, have you not?
Many of them, because I always lose them and they blow off. But
I hope you're not buying the fine ones then.
Well, they're weirdly made in Ecuador. They're not really connected to Panama outside of Teddy Roosevelt's making them famous.
I would love to visit the canal. You even pointed out visiting San Juan Hill in Cuba would be very fascinating.
Yeah, I've been to Cuba, but not San Juan.
I'm going to do a little bit more of research on that, whether there's anything to actually see that's marked with Theodore Roosevelt, because I don't know that. Certainly it's harder to visit Cuba now than it was, during the Obama presidency when relations were normalizing. But that would be a fascinating site. And that's a chapter we're not going to dig super into today. But, TR really wanted some military experience. And so he gathered this kind of ramshackle group of old ranchers and hunters and put together the Rough Riders, and the Rough Riders famously fought on San Juan Hill in Cuba. And so that's a history that I'd be interested to see if there's any preservation of it. And I will come back with a recap.
There's definitely it's preserved as a historic battlefield in Cuba.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, it'd be fascinating to know, like, is TR a particular part of that story for them?
It would probably be a different.
I'm sure
side.
It would be, and rightfully so. Now,
just like TR is just not a popular political figure in Colombia because they see him as someone who basically stole one of their states. So
I mean, he was an empire builder for sure. He really believed in growing our land. And it's, Panama Canal, of course, is like kind of back in the news now because it's something that's of interest to Trump. And, the ownership of the canal and, was it right to build it? All of these things are complicated historical questions. But I feel like visiting these places gives you even better context by which to have an opinion.
Absolutely.
So I touched on the upcoming presidential library. I did just want to share a couple of notes on it, which is it's going to open in July 2026. And it seems like the building itself is going to be really something cool to visit because they're trying to bring to life TR's dedication to conservation. And so it's going to have an earth-covered roof. And it's going to be positioned such that it also has a beautiful viewpoint of that Theodore Roosevelt National Park next to it. And so it's the same design firm that worked on the National September 11th Memorial.
Which I think is pretty incredible.
Incredible. Yeah. And the Museum of Modern Art in San Francisco. So these are not, this is like a real serious undertaking in a proper presidential library and museum.
Well, that is exciting and weird that Teddy didn't have a museum, but I guess, that will be one for us to visit.
Now, I've got to wrap us up on the topic, a grab bag of interesting spots that also have TR connections, but are, one step away from places that he physically was or spent a lot of time or tell a lot about his biography. The first is I want to just call out the national park system in general. TR is known as the conservation president. Douglas Brinkley has written 2 great books. One that focuses on TR and how he harnessed governmental power to protect public lands, extend public lands, and a follow-up that was about how FDR continued that legacy. Both great books. Douglas Brinkley actually was at the opening of the new statue at the American Museum of Natural History when we were there, Ryan. And the national park system was really, really young at the time that TR was president, and he actually doubled the number of protected sites. And he was really testing the limits of how much a president could preserve. And so he actually had 5 national parks that became national parks under his watch. And I'm proud to say that all of them that are still national parks, I have been to. You've got Crater Lake in Oregon, a tremendous lake that you can walk the rim of, and it's got a cool island in the middle. Well worth preservation, an interesting historic lodge there. Wind Cave, South Dakota, which is so called because the cave system quote unquote breathes, where if you're when the entrance was smaller than it is today, you used to be able to feel the air getting sucked in, and famously it was discovered because a local's hat was sucked into the small hole. They dug into the hole and discovered a cave system. Wind Cave. Sully's Hill, North Dakota, which is now actually redesignated as a game preserve. Mesa Verde in Colorado, which is a beautiful national park site that preserves cliff dwellings. So it's the rare national park that is founded to protect a cultural site created by humans. And Platt, Oklahoma, which is now it's been redesignated. It's part of the Chickasaw National Recreation Area. So, here we are well over 100 years later, and TR's impact still being felt.
Yeah, well, that is. I haven't been to that many of these national parks, so all good reasons to visit, and certainly when you look back at TR's legacy, his commitment to protecting public lands is got to be up there number 1 for me.
Well, and a key piece of legislation called the Antiquities Act of June 8th, 1906. Passed under him and is still used today by virtually every president to control public lands, and especially set aside public lands for preservation, which is why almost every president, particularly the Democratic presidents, will set aside lands that have not yet acquired all the protections. But that future is always in flux. But yeah, the Antiquities Act, every few years it comes up because the president makes a move. Now, the only other grab bag spots I want to say is, of course, Mount Rushmore. It doesn't have a great TR connection, except for the fact that he's one of the 4 faces on it.
For now, I hear he might get replaced.
Oh, brother. Yeah. I mean, why would you come on, replace, who are you going to put? Maybe Jefferson. Yeah, replace Jefferson. Keep TR up there.
I don't know. I just leave it all alone.
No, you can't replace. They've done a bunch of studies. The Rock is too fragile. But yeah, TR is up there. Mount Rushmore is weird. I'm famous for saying that. I've been there. You get there and you kind of go, what? Why did we do this? And the story of Mount Rushmore coming to be is really interesting, but ultimately it's because South Dakota needed some tourism. And so they hired a sculptor named Gutzon Borglum, one of my favorite names in all of American history, Gutzon Borglum. And he carved TR into the mountain alongside Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson, and Washington. And the final site that I think is really underknown, but I really encourage you to make time for, is if you're in Washington, D.C., there is an island it used to be called Mason's Island. And in the 1930s, it was reconceived as Theodore Roosevelt Island. And it is a beautiful little nature preserve with a great statue of TR. And they have this central area where big quotes of his are put up on rocks. And it's a great place to just feel, you're close to the city, but you can kind of escape into nature. Great routes for walking and running. And it's really close to the city. You can walk across the bridge and get to it in about, it's like 20 minutes. I mean, it's really, really close.
I've been to DC 100,000 times. I've never even heard of this.
I know it's really undersung, but it's got the statue's really cool. It's him making a fiery speech, and it's a beautiful spot. It's right if you're at the Kennedy Center, you kind of walk across the bridge right near there.
Cool.
And so that wraps it up. It's a ton of TR stops. The man was tireless. I could have put 10 more on here, but we only have so much time.
Yeah, well, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last stop. It's the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. That's why it's called the last stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment, and it's popularly known as the people segment, because that's where we come together as a community and we share. We could share anything. Could be a story, an article, a joke. I don't know if we've ever had a joke. I'm going to take that on as a challenge, last stop joke. But the reason it's going to be a challenge is because it has to meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kiernan. I was reading this article I've linked in the show notes about a company out of Texas that is inventing these AR, augmented reality app where you can go to famous sites and you can look in your phone and see what it would have been like to be at the Parthenon, at the height of the powers. I think this might, be terrible. And the last thing I think people need to be doing is be on their phones more at these places, since they're all already just videoing. How are they going to look at the AR while they're videoing? They're going to need two phones, I guess. But I think there is some interesting aspects here, for lesser known sites, but I can't imagine it being a better experience to watch computer generated soldiers march around Rome than just sort of see what is currently there. I don't know. What do you think, Kiernan?
I mark me down as skeptical, I guess.
But I've linked in the show notes, and you can see some of the sites and that they're working on, and I think this will be done. This will be certainly be a big part of travel in the future, whether we like it or not, us old men. Kiernan, what did you bring to the last stop?
I have an article from Architectural Digest that just came out this week. Sometimes, Ryan, we have an episode and then it's suddenly you see the content everywhere else. This is one of those. We just did our coverage of Detroit, a great trip to Detroit, where I spotlighted a bunch of great architectural treasures in Detroit. And sure enough, Architectural Digest put out this article, Detroit is booming and it's a must visit for design lovers. And they cover some of the same stuff, a lot of the same stuff that we had Belle Isle, the Institute of Arts there, some of the historic buildings that I talked about. There's a couple gems in here. I also like they talk about how different architectural designs influenced cars that were designed in Detroit. And so they make quite a lot of the Jeep Wagoneer that they're driving around. And it's a great read. I would say if you're heading to Detroit and looking for, just a stop-by-stop list of where you should go, this is a good resource for it. And this kind of ties to something very timely, which is Ford just decided that they are, and just announced they're going to tear down their famous historic headquarters in Dearborn. They're relocating the company to a couple of different offices, but primarily near the Henry Ford Museum. And so if you want to see that famous building, you're going to have to get there within the year.
Well, that is a reason for me to get back to Detroit, and I can't believe they're tearing it down as as opposed to preserving it in some way. But
yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It's not an architectural treasure. It's not a design treasure. I mean, I feel a certain way about it because I've spent so many hours there with work. But I can understand why, of all the things you want to preserve, this one's not on the top of the list.
What are we talking about next week?
I'm going to have an interview with Richard Fain, the chairman and former CEO of Royal Caribbean Group. So, I went on my first Royal Caribbean cruise this year, and I want to talk all about the logistics and how you make a cruise something that attracts people.
Well, that'll be interesting. Until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Let's go to Cuba on our boys'
maybe
weekend.
We could go Theodore Roosevelt National Park to Cuba. You think there's a direct flight Dakota to San Juan?
Via Miami.